Hello and welcome. My name is Vineet Malhotra and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories from today. US President Donald Trump has defended his tariff policy after China hit the US with a 125 retaliatory tariff. The White House says Trump is still optimistic over a China trade deal as investors grapple with the tariff-driven market swings. US and Iranian officials are set to meet in Oman over a nuclear deal, the first direct talks between the nations in a decade. The meeting comes amidst threats from President Donald Trump of military action if a deal is not agreed upon. President Trump has urged Vladimir Putin to get moving on a ceasefire in Ukraine as the Russian president meets with US envoy Steve Witkoff. Overnight Russian strikes have been reported in Ukraine, targeting Kyiv and other major cities. Meanwhile, US and Ukrainian officials have met to discuss a minerals deal. Reuters report that sources close to the matter indicate no major breakthroughs with an antagonistic atmosphere in the meeting. Further deadly Israeli strikes have been reported in Gaza as US President Donald Trump says progress is being made in hostage negotiations. A Hamas delegation is headed to Cairo for talks as Israel submits a softened hostage deal proposal. And a bomb has exploded outside of the offices of Greece's main railway company with no reported injuries. Police are investigating amid continued anger over the country's worst rail disaster in 2023, killing 57 people. Former South Korean President Yoon Suk Yeol has left his residence surrounded by supporters following his impeachment ruling. Yoon still faces a criminal trial for his short-lived martial law declaration. An LA judge has ruled that a resentencing hearing for Kyle and Eric Menendez can go ahead. The brothers are serving a life term for the 1989 murder of their parents, though a recent Netflix documentary raised new evidence of abuse by their parents. Alright, starting with our top story, Iran's foreign ministry spokesman Ismail Baqai says indirect nuclear talks with the US in Oman are still at an early stage and aren't expected to last long, according to state television. Iran and the United States have begun high-level indirect talks in Oman, aiming to revive stalled negotiations over Tehran's advancing nuclear program. These are the first such discussions under President Donald Trump's current term, with Iran's delegation led by Foreign Minister Abbas Araqchi and the US side represented by Trump's Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff. According to Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson, the talks are taking place through Omani mediation, with each side in separate rooms and messages exchanged via Oman's foreign minister. The discussions are expected to focus on de-escalating regional tensions, potential prisoner swaps, and limited sanctions relief in exchange for nuclear curbs. According to analysts, Oman has long played a mediating role between Iran and Western countries, including previous successful efforts to secure the release of detainees. But Iran is approaching the talks cautiously, citing deep mistrust of Trump, who has threatened military action if no agreement is reached. The two sides have yet to agree on whether future meetings will be face-to-face or remain indirect. Prior to the talks, Araqchi met with Omani Foreign Minister Badr al-Busaidi in Muscat to outline Iran's positions for the US side. Let's hear what Iran FM had to say.
تیمی که بنده همراه میکنن از دوستان کاملا متخصص و مطلع در این حوزه خاص هستند که سابقه مذاکراتی هم در رابطه با همین بحث دارند و ما با به هر حال جدیت لازم شرکت کردیم. نیت ما رسیدن به یک توافق منصفانه و شرافتمندانه هست از موضع برابر و اگر طرف مقابل هم از همین موضع وارد شده باشه انشالله شانسی برای یک تفاهم اولیه که منجر به یک مسیر مذاکره.
All right, Mr. Daniel Roth, researcher, director, United Against Nuclear Iran, is joining us all the way from New York. Daniel, appreciate you taking out the time and speaking with us. Well, considering the volatility in the Middle East and considering that there is a war going on in the Middle East, how important is it for both of these countries, that's the United States and Iran, to work towards de-escalation?
Yes, good evening. I mean, I think from Iran's point of view, having been significantly weakened since October the 7th by Israel, having taken out much of its, defensive capabilities, having decimated and maimed much of its terrorist proxies, Hamas, Hezbollah, and obviously the inauguration of a new, much tougher US president, much more hawkish on Iran, it sees this as an existential threat to the survival of its regime. So from Iran's point of view, essentially this is all about stalling. It's about coming to some kind of arrangement where the US is not going to actually threaten the regime's very survival. From the US point of view, because of all those things I just listed, it does see this as a real opportunity to drive home that principle that successive US administrations have had, that Iran will not acquire a nuclear weapon. And that means permanently, not just for 10 or 15 years under the terms of the JCPOA, the Obama deal. So that's where the two sides are coming from. As you can imagine, they are a long way apart, and that's why I don't hold out much hope of an actual agreement in Oman at this point.
Daniel, considering the fact that Iran has been a country that has been accused of, financing and facilitating proxy wars, through a number of terrorist organizations, how palpable do you think is this nuclear threat from Iran?
Well, the threat is very palpable, despite what the regime will tell you. Their propaganda is, we have a fatwa prohibiting nuclear weapons. I mean, that is a huge misconception about what's actually being said inside Iran. I mean, just today we heard Iranian media saying, well, actually, the fatwa, if it even exists, only prohibits the use of nuclear weapons. It doesn't actually prohibit the production of nuclear weapons. So as you mentioned, Iran is the #1 state sponsor of terrorism around the world. Every terrorist group in the Middle East is essentially financed and sponsored by Iran, by Tehran. You can imagine how bad things would be were Iran to acquire at that nuclear weapon. That threat would always be hanging over the entire region. So yes, it makes sense for Iran to never explicitly say we're going to have a nuclear weapon. It's useful for them to be on the threshold at all times. So, Iran does have enough to make crude nuclear bombs at this very moment. It may not have the technology to miniaturize them, to weaponize onto a ballistic missile right now, but that's certainly coming. And as I say, it's useful for Iran to be on the precipice.
Daniel, how, realistic, for the lack of a better word, is it for the Americans and the Iranians to come together to some sort of an agreement, considering the fact that since Donald Trump has taken office, all he's talked about is more or less an escalation, obliteration, as well as a tension with Iran?
I agree with your implication. I would be surprised if there is some accommodation, if there is some deal struck during these negotiations. President Trump, obviously, the author of Art of the Deal, he would like nothing more than to come to an agreement. But I think he himself is pretty clear-eyed in what this regime represents, which is, the main sponsor of terror, sowing discord around the region, if not the world. So yes, the prospects look dim, but the president is giving it his best shot.
Always a pleasure having you. Thank you so much for speaking to us. Moving on, Argentina's President Javier Milei says that the country's economy is about to grow like never before. This bold prediction comes after Argentina secured a massive $42 billion in international aid. A lifeline, Milei says, will drive the country towards the strongest economic growth of the next 30 years. The financial backing includes $20 billion from the IMF, $12 billion from the World Bank, and another $10 billion from the Inter-American Development Bank. Speaking on national television, Milei hailed the support as a turning point for Argentina's struggling economy. Argentina's finance minister, Luis Caputo, also said that $19 billion will arrive in Buenos Aires within the next 60 days, including a fast-tracked $12 billion tranche from the IMF to stabilize the peso. The World Bank has already pledged $1.5 billion in near-term funds, while IMF chief Kristalina Georgieva praised Milei's impressive progress and said that the aid package reflects international confidence in his aggressive economic reforms. Milei, who calls himself an anarcho-capitalist, has pushed sweeping deregulation and deep spending cuts since taking office. This new wave of financial support marks a major political victory, one Milei hopes will help revive Argentina's battered economy. Let's listen in to what he said.
Las bases para la estabilidad y el crecimiento sostenido para el mediano y largo plazo. De aquí en más, la economía real de los argentinos mejorará en el marco de dicha estabilidad y crecerá como nunca antes.
Professor Madhav Nalapa, the editorial director of the Sunday Guardian, joining us on the program. Professor Nalapa, appreciate you being here with us, sir. Pretty much it's good going for the Argentinians, but the fact of the matter is there a precedent from the past, sir, in your memory, where a country has, done well economically after securing a loan of about $50 billion?
Well, I'd like to point out to the contrary, which is that countries that have basically taken the IMF medicine in exchange for the sweetener, added sweetener of a loan. Remember, it's not a grant; it's a loan. They have suffered. History shows that. Now, as far as Argentina is concerned, Javier Milei says he's an anarcho-capitalist. Possibly, he will not mind what is very likely to happen, which is the dollarization of the Argentine economy. And I think that is the only way that that is going to develop where the Argentine economy is concerned and currency is controlled. Once you liberalize currency controls, people will then buy up dollars and store it. Now, the important thing is to make them feel secure and to make them feel that dollars will not be expropriated. Otherwise, they will find various ways and channels of taking it abroad, so that what happens is foreign banks in foreign countries will get the benefit and not Argentina. Javier Milei is a man who is quite good at these things. He would have thought things through, Vinny. So I think, frankly, he will anticipate the de-pesoization of the Argentine economy and the dollarization of the Argentine economy. Well, that's one way of going. But the only point is that the central bank loses all control. But in any case, central banks are going to lose control because the more the digital economy grows, the more certain systems of payment grow that are outside the central banking system of the whole world, the less the effect of central banks. So frankly, the influence of central banks, thanks to technology, is destined to fade out over time. Milei will simply be, accelerating the process. So I think, Vinny, it's indeed a very brave move, and but it is definitely going to lead to the dollarization of the Argentine economy, and if possible, and I think that could be a route. Why? Because you've got a decoupling from China. You've seen very clearly how Trump is now escalating the trade war on China. Now, the problem facing Xi Jinping is if he caves under and he succumbs to Trump, then he's seen as weak. And in the CCP system, well, that's all that they're waiting for, to change him. So the reality is that it's become completely uneconomic to produce in China. So Argentina will, under Milei, I'm certain Argentina will work hard on ensuring it becomes an attractive alternative destination for the industries that are decoupling from China. Milai is definitely a visionary, definitely a reformer, and if he does that, then the Argentine economy will get the huge benefit of a lot of investment coming. And by the way, Vineet, the same applies with even greater force to India. India is also likely to be the primary beneficiary of the decoupling of units, manufacturing industry, tech certainly. I mean, Apple and all these companies that have invested heavily in China for components, they have all lost huge amounts of market cap. So the reality is China is no longer economic. Donald Trump, I think, is going to stay the course, which means, frankly, that the dollar is going to basically continue as a global reserve currency. And that means that companies will have to decouple from China and dealing themselves from production in China. And Argentina, frankly, offers a good base. Not at all as good as India, definitely, but definitely a good base within South America for that kind of decoupling, Vineet.
Right, and Professor Nalapat, you've already covered what I was going to ask you. The good news is here that one more country has been saved, from the Chinese debt trap, and that's exactly what I was going to ask you in my next question as well. And this is a big deal, considering the fact that China has always had its eye out, for volatile situations such as this, and Argentina perhaps has, gotten the better of them.
Well, I'd like to agree with you. The fact is, the Belt and Road Initiative is creating not only huge debt in these countries, and frankly, that's being sovereign countries, they can repudiate and walk out of that debt anytime. I mean, they can announce that that debt is going to be repaid in 99 years without interest, and China can do nothing about it, whereas the Chinese have incurred a huge amount of expenditure, which is really costing their economy quite a lot. And as a consequence of Donald Trump and the fact that he is very much committed to ensuring the end of the expansionism of China, they have also got to vastly increase their defense spending. So altogether, frankly, in my view, the Chinese are not entering into a comfortable phase. And yes, you're perfectly right. The Chinese factor is very important. The Belt and Road Initiative has cuts both ways. It cuts the countries that are taking the BRI money, and it hurts China by the huge amount of money it is spending on the BRI, money which a lot of which is likely to go up in smoke beneath.
Always a pleasure having you, sir. Thank you so much. All right, well, over the past several weeks, U.S. immigration authorities have also cracked down on several international students who have taken part in pro-Palestinian protests or spoken out in defense of Palestinians in Gaza. Mahmoud Khalil, arrested on 8th of March and detained to Jena, Louisiana, in a major development. An immigration judge has confirmed that Khalil is eligible for deportation from the United States. The ruling came during a heated hearing at a remote court in central Louisiana. It supports a Trump-era claim based on a memo from Secretary of State Marco Rubio. The memo claims Khalil's current or expected beliefs, statements, or associations go against U.S. foreign policy interests. It includes no criminal allegations. Khalil's legal team pushed back, calling the evidence vague and insufficient. However, his appeal has been denied. There was a similar proceeding that happened in the case of Yunsier Chung, which is rapidly emerging as a flashpoint in the national debate over free speech and immigration enforcement under the Trump administration. Concerns rise in America as students across the nation face these contradictions. All right, at this point in time, Mr. Ahmed Fatou, spokesperson for the Fatah movement, is joining us on the broadcast. Ahmed, appreciate you speaking with us. What do you make of these deportations on the basis of what people are expressing when it comes to the war between Israel and Palestine? Ahmed, I can't hear you. There seems to be a problem with your audio. Could you try unmuting yourself, please? Ahmed?
Vineet, I think we have lost Ahmed. Ahmed, are you there? Ahmed? 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 Ahmed?
All right, there seems to be a problem with Ahmad's audio, but we'll conclude with that report. Thank you for watching NewsX World.